Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Elias stood in the dimly lit library of the academy, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the stone walls. His master had left for the evening, leaving him alone to finish cataloging ancient scrolls and tomes. It was a quiet night, but something about the air felt different, heavy with anticipation. His fingers traced the spine of a dusty, leather-bound book, but his eyes were drawn to an object tucked away in the corner of the room, half hidden beneath a cloth. The academy library was ancient, its walls thick with history and arcane power. Though Elias had spent countless nights working late here, he had never noticed this particular mirror before. There was something about it, something that tugged at his curiosity. He stepped closer, pulling back the cloth with a soft whisper of fabric. Beneath, an ornate frame of dark wood, twisted into impossible shapes, held a tall mirror that shimmered in the faint light. Elias hesitated. He had heard the legends of magical mirrors, objects that connected different realms, that reflected not just what was before them but something far more dangerous. His master had often warned him not to meddle with things beyond his understanding. But Elias was a magic apprentice, hungry for knowledge and eager to prove himself. What harm could come from just looking? He leaned in, peering into the mirror's surface. At first, it showed only his reflection, a young man with tousled brown hair, blue eyes, and the faintest smudge of ink on his cheek from a long night of transcribing spells. But then the image wavered, like ripples across the surface of water. His reflection blurred, shifted. For a moment, Elias saw not himself but another version of him, standing in the same library, yet everything around him was wrong. The bookshelves were twisted, the air darker, heavier, like a storm about to break. Suddenly, a pulse of magic rippled through the room. Elias stumbled backward, but it was too late. The mirror surged with energy, and before he could react, it pulled him in, the world around him dissolving into a swirl of darkness. When he opened his eyes, Elias found himself lying on cold, hard ground. His heart raced as he pushed himself to his feet, his head spinning. The room looked familiar, but not. The library was here, same walls, same shelves, but everything was decayed, as if years, even centuries, had passed. The air was thick with dust, and the once bright candles now flickered with a sickly green flame. That he turned to face the mirror, but it was different too. Where once there had been glass, there was now only a swirling, dark void, and through it, he could see glimpses of the world he had left behind, fading fast. Panic gripped him. He reached out to touch the surface, but his hand passed through nothingness. He was trapped. Elias. The voice startled him. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it sent a chill down his spine. He turned quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing in the doorway was a figure, familiar yet completely foreign. It was him. Or rather, it was a twisted version of himself, dark eyes, sharp features, and an aura of cold malice. His reflection smirked, a cruel smile playing at the edges of his lips. "Welcome to the mirror world," the reflection said, his voice like the wind through dead trees. "You shouldn't have come here." Elias stumbled backward, his mind racing. This had to be a dream, some strange illusion brought on by the mirror's magic. But it felt too real, the coldness of the air, the weight of dread in his chest. What is this place?" The reflection's smile widened. "This is a world between worlds, a reflection of your own. But here, everything is reversed, twisted. The curse that holds this world is ancient, and you are now a part of it. There's no going back, unless you find a way to break the curse." Elias's breath caught. A curse? How do I break it? The reflection's eyes gleamed with dark amusement. That's for you to figure out. But beware, apprentice. Time works differently here. The longer you stay, the more this world will change you. And once you're fully a part of it, there's no escape. With that, the reflection vanished, dissolving into the shadows that clung to the edges of the room. Elias stood there, heart pounding in his ears, his mind racing. He was trapped in a cursed world, a mirror version of his own reality, and he had no idea how to escape, but there was no time to waste. If this world was truly cursed, and if time flowed differently here, he needed to find a way out, and fast. He wasn't about to let this twisted version of himself take over his life. Elias gathered himself, shaking off the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. He had always been a quick thinker, resourceful in the face of danger. If he could survive his master's grueling training, he could survive this. The first step was figuring out what this curse was and how to break it. He left the library, stepping out into the academy halls. The once grand corridors were now crumbling, the air thick with decay. The walls were covered in strange, shifting shadows, and the portraits of ancient wizards that lined the halls now stared at him with hollow, empty eyes. The sense of wrongness was pervasive, seeping into his bones. As he made his way through the academy, Elias realized that the people here, his fellow apprentices, the teachers, even his master, were all twisted reflections of themselves. They moved like shadows, their faces distorted, their eyes empty of the life and warmth he knew. Elias had to remind himself constantly that this wasn't his world. These weren't his friends. They were mere reflections, parts of the curse that held this place in its grip. It wasn't long before he encountered the first sign of hope. In the academy's central courtyard, where a once beautiful fountain now lay cracked and dry, Elias found a strange object, a glowing stone set in the ground. As he approached, he could feel the magic emanating from it, pulsing like a heartbeat. This was no ordinary stone. Kneeling, he touched the stone, and a surge of energy shot through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, an ancient sorcerer, cloaked in darkness, casting a powerful spell. The spell twisted reality itself, creating the mirror world and binding it to a curse that would last for eternity. The stone was one of 3 artifacts tied to the sorcerer's downfall. Elias knew instinctively that these artifacts were the key to breaking the curse, but before he could fully grasp the meaning of the vision, a voice interrupted him. "So, you found one of the artifacts." Elias whirled around to see a woman standing behind him. She was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a sword strapped to her back. Her clothes were tattered, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had survived many battles. "Who are you?" Elias asked, still on edge from his encounter with his reflection. The woman smirked. "The name's Ariana." "And you? You're clearly not from around here." Elias nodded. "I'm Elias. I got pulled into this world by the mirror. I'm trying to find a way out." Ariana's expression softened slightly. "Same story for most of us. But if you found one of the artifacts, you might actually have a chance." Elias felt a flicker of hope. "You know about the curse?" Ariana nodded, her face grim. "I've been trapped here for years. The curse keeps us all bound, slowly warping us into twisted versions of ourselves. The only way to break it is to find all 3 artifacts and undo the sorcerer's spell." Elias clenched his fists. "I'm not staying here long enough to be changed by this place. We need to find the other artifacts." Ariana raised an eyebrow. "We?" Elias shrugged. You seem to know your way around. And I could use the help. Ariana studied him for a moment before nodding. Fair enough. But don't trust anyone here, not even yourself. Together, they set off to find the remaining artifacts. As they journeyed through the mirror version of the Academy and beyond, Elias found himself relying on Ariana's knowledge and experience. She had been in the mirror world far longer than him, and though her demeanor was tough, there was something about her that reminded him of his own mentors, but the further they traveled, the more Elias noticed changes in himself. The magic of the mirror world was insidious, creeping into his mind and body. He felt his emotions shifting, darker thoughts taking root. He found it harder to resist the reflection's voice in his head, whispering temptations of power and control. Every step he took toward finding the artifacts was a battle, not just against the twisted creatures of the mirror world, but against his own inner darkness. The second artifact was hidden in a labyrinth deep within the Academy's dungeons. The walls seemed to shift and change as they navigated the maze, each turn bringing them closer to their goal but also closer to danger. At one point, they were separated, and Elias found himself face to face with his reflection once more. "You're wasting your time, you know," the reflection said, stepping out from the shadows. "This place will consume you, just like it consumed everyone else. Why fight it?" Elias clenched his fists. "I'm not like you. I won't give in." The reflection laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You already have. You just don't realize it yet." But Elias pushed past him, determined not to be swayed by the darkness. When he finally found the second artifact, a shard of an ancient mirror, the power surged through him again, stronger this time. He felt the magic weaving around him, pulling at his very soul. By the time they reached the location of the final artifact, a forgotten, ruined tower on the outskirts of the Academy grounds, Elias was barely holding on. The reflection had grown stronger, more persistent, and Ariana had grown more distant, her own struggle with the curse becoming apparent. She warned Elias not to trust her if they found the last artifact, for the temptation would be too great, and she was right. When they finally laid eyes on the third and final artifact, a black crystal pulsing with dark magic, the air itself seemed to hum with danger. Elias felt the pull of the mirror world stronger than ever, and for a moment, he was tempted to surrender, to merge with his reflection and embrace the power the mirror offered. But he remembered who he was. He remembered his friends, his master, his life outside this cursed world. And with one final effort, he shattered the crystal, releasing the spell that bound the mirror world. The world around them began to collapse, the shadows retreating, the twisted versions of people fading into nothing. Elias grabbed Ariana's arm, pulling her toward the mirror that had brought him here. Together, they stepped through just as the mirror world crumbled into dust. Back in the real world, Elias collapsed onto the cold stone floor of the library. He was back. The air was fresh, the room bright, and the mirror, the cursed mirror, now lay silent, its power broken. Elias stared at it for a long moment, then rose to his feet. He had done it. He had broken the curse, but as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror's influence hadn't entirely left him. The reflection might be gone, but the darkness had left its mark, and somewhere, deep within the recesses of his mind, he could still hear its whisper. Elias stood there for a moment, his breathing uneven as the sensation of the mirror world still clung to him like a heavy fog. His limbs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming sense of unease that remained long after the mirror had been silenced. The magic had been broken, and yet the lingering effects of that world, the shadows, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, clung to him. He rubbed his temples, willing away the memories that felt too fresh, too present. Ariana, beside him, gave a quiet sigh, leaning against the cold stone wall of the library. She, too, looked disoriented, as if reality itself had shifted beneath her feet. They had made it out together, but there was no triumph in their expressions, only the quiet, shared understanding that neither of them had left the mirror world unchanged. "You did it," Ariana muttered, her voice hoarse. "You broke the curse." Elias nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the now dormant mirror. The ornate frame was still there, the swirling void replaced by dull, lifeless glass. His reflection stared back at him, unremarkable, and yet Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of wariness. How long would it stay that way? What if the curse wasn't truly broken, just subdued? The thought gnawed at him. "Did I?" he asked quietly, more to himself than to Ariana. Ariana turned to face him, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Elias sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "I shattered the final artifact, but—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It felt like something stayed with me. I thought I heard the mirror whisper as we left. Maybe it's just a part of me now. A scar." Ariana's gaze softened slightly. "We were in there too long," she admitted. "No one comes out of a place like that untouched. I've been here longer than I can remember, and I felt it too. But that's the cost, Elias. We're still ourselves. We made it back." Her voice was firm, a thin edge of steel beneath it. "Don't let that world keep its grip on you." He nodded, though inwardly he wasn't so sure. There was something about the mirror that felt permanent, like a part of him had been altered in ways he couldn't fully understand yet. But there wasn't time to dwell on it. The academy was waiting, his master would have questions, and life outside the mirror world was still moving. Ariana pushed herself off the wall, her body tense, and Elias noticed the way she kept a hand close to the hilt of her sword, even now. "I should go," she said abruptly, looking around the library with a distant expression. "I've been gone for too long. The world I remember is likely gone, but I need to find out for myself." Elias looked at her, unsure what to say. "You're leaving?" "I have to," she replied, her voice softer now. "I don't belong here. I never did." There was a long pause, and Elias felt a sudden, unexpected pang of loss. Ariana had been his only ally in that dark, twisted world, and now she was about to disappear just as quickly as she'd appeared. "Thank you," Elias said quietly, offering her a small, genuine smile. "For everything. I don't think I would have made it out without you." Ariana's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Don't go getting sentimental on me, apprentice." She took a step toward the door, then paused, glancing over her shoulder. "Take care of yourself. And watch your back. The mirror, it's not the only thing out there that wants to twist your mind." And with that, she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the empty halls of the academy. Elias stood in the library for a long time, staring at the mirror. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unresolved, that the reflection of himself he had fought wasn't entirely gone. His reflection now seemed normal enough, but in the depths of his mind, he could still feel that darkness lurking, waiting. Eventually, he turned away from the mirror and made his way back to his chambers. The academy was quiet, the other students long since retired to their rooms for the night. He climbed the spiral staircase to his small, cluttered quarters, his mind heavy with everything that had happened. The mirror world had changed him, he knew that much, but what exactly that change entailed, he couldn't yet say. Sleep, when it came, was restless. His dreams were filled with twisted corridors, shadowy figures, and the echoing laughter of his reflection, haunting him from the darkness. He woke several times, drenched in sweat, the room feeling stifling despite the cool night air. Each time, the whisper from the mirror seemed to grow louder in his mind. The next morning, Elias dragged himself out of bed, exhausted but determined not to let the mirror's curse rule him. He made his way to the main hall of the academy, where his master, Magister Dorian, was already waiting, his hands folded neatly in his robes. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes as Elias approached. "Elias," the Magister greeted, his voice measured. "I've been hearing troubling reports from the night before. You disappeared from your duties, and now it seems there's something you need to explain." Elias hesitated for a moment, unsure how to begin. How could he explain everything that had happened in the mirror world without sounding insane? But he knew his master was a patient man, wise beyond his years. So, he took a deep breath and told him everything: the mirror, the reflection, Ariana, the curse. He left nothing out, not even the part about the lingering darkness he still felt inside him. Magister Dorian listened in silence, his expression never wavering. When Elias finished, the Magister's brow furrowed, his fingers steepled in thought. "This mirror you speak of," Dorian said slowly, "it is far older than this academy, far older than you or I. Its magic is ancient, dangerous. You were lucky to survive such an encounter." Elias nodded. "I know. But, what if the curse wasn't fully broken? I still feel something, like a part of that world is still with me." Dorian's gaze sharpened. "That is not unheard of. The magic of such a place can leave scars, marks that may never fully fade. But you are strong, Elias. Stronger than you realize. The mirror could not take you, and that is a testament to your will." Elias appreciated the words, but they did little to ease the weight that pressed on him. "What should I do?" The Magister considered this for a moment, then said, "Continue your studies. Focus on your training. The mirror may have touched you, but it does not define you. The more you learn, the stronger you will become, and the less hold it will have over you." Elias nodded, though the unease in his chest remained. He thanked his master and left the hall, the Magister's words echoing in his mind. Focus on his studies. Continue his training. It all sounded so simple, and yet, after what he had experienced, nothing felt simple anymore. Days passed, and Elias threw himself into his work, trying to drown out the lingering whispers from the mirror. He studied harder than ever, practicing his spells late into the night, pushing his limits with magic that most of his fellow apprentices wouldn't dare attempt. His mind, sharp and focused, helped him excel, but there was always a shadow over his thoughts, like a distant storm waiting to break. And then, one evening, as he was practicing a particularly difficult incantation, it happened: the shadows around him deepened, the room growing unnaturally cold. Elias's heart raced as he felt the familiar presence of the mirror world creeping into his mind. He spun around, expecting to see his reflection standing there, taunting him as before, but there was nothing. Just the empty room, silent save for the crackling of the fire. Still, the feeling remained, heavy and oppressive. Elias clenched his fists, his pulse quickening. He had to fight it. He couldn't let the mirror win. But how could he defeat something that wasn't even here? Suddenly, the fire in the hearth flickered, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. Elias's breath hitched as the temperature dropped further, his skin prickling with cold. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, his reflection, not in the mirror, but in the window, faint and ghostly, watching him. "You'll never be free," it whispered, the voice like ice sliding down his spine. Elias closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing, trying to calm the panic rising in his chest. He had fought this before, in the mirror world. He could fight it again. He wouldn't let it take him. When he opened his eyes again, the reflection was gone, the fire relit, the room warm once more. But the feeling remained, gnawing at him. The mirror's curse was still with him, lurking just beneath the surface. And though he had escaped its world, Elias knew that the battle wasn't over, not yet, but he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because now, he understood the truth. The mirror didn't control him. It couldn't. The darkness it held, the twisted reflection, they were all parts of him, parts he had to acknowledge but never let dominate. Elias would continue to train, to grow stronger, to learn more about the magic that had ensnared him. And one day, he would face the mirror again, not as a frightened apprentice, but as a master of his own fate.